Okay, so this week, the way that I messed up was that I did the entire video without my mic turned on. Yay! So last time I didn't have my camera turned on, this time I didn't have my mic turned on. Maybe next week I'll actually be able to figure it all out at the same time. That would be super cool. But anyway, hi, it's me again, suffering through these technological difficulties. Can't even say technology. That's how tricky it is for me. Anyway, I wanted to make another video because I'm sick of writing essays in my other class already, and we just got started. And yeah, I think it's kind of different and cool. So anyway, I'm gonna run through this whole thing again because I just can never get it right on the first try. Ah. Blah, 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 blah. So, responses to danger influencing communal life in traditional societies. I just wanted to mention, I wrote down really two main points that I guess stood out to me as the most easily identifiable, I guess, and that is that they talk a lot more than we do in Western societies. Diamond pointed out that they talk about things that people in Western societies might even see as trivial or, not worth the breath, but they talk about everything, and I think that has a lot to do, or it's mentioned, not that I think it, but it is mentioned that has a lot to do with just communicating those dangers and communicating those risks and communication in general, because in the Western world, obviously, we have a lot of easy access to news, to media, to all of these sources of, I guess, risks or things that we should be afraid of. And in the lecture, Dr. Hamilton mentions that it's good for business. Fear is good for business, and that's so true in the Western world. We're always looking for a solution to our fears, and that can be marketed to us over and over and over again, and from so many different angles, because there are so many things that we're supposed to be afraid of. Even just the fear of aging, which goes back to last week. And then, I also mentioned that they live and sleep in really close quarters, and obviously that's to minimize danger, to minimize risks, and to improve overall safety. And it's mentioned that they talk so much that they even wake up in the night, and it's quite normal for them to wake up in the night and talk to each other, and that probably has a lot to do with risks as well, because not only them waking up in the middle of the night not only creates sound, and so maybe helps to scare away any critters or predators or anything that might be lurking not that far away. It's probably helpful to periodically make noise to scare away wildlife, but it's also helpful to wake up and check in with each other, make sure everything's good, and it's just very normal for them to communicate regularly with each other as well. And then of course the places that they settle are obviously influenced by dangers as well. It's mentioned by Diamond, that whole story about the old tree that the New Guineans were so scared of, they didn't want to make camp under it because they were so scared that it was going to fall. And of course Diamond at first thought that was really absurd and a irrational fear, and then he comes to realize that when you do something so frequently that it's essentially inevitable that one day a tree will squish you, that it makes sense to be afraid of something like that. And so that segues into whether or not I think constructive paranoia is helpful or not. And me personally, I think that it can be very helpful in a lot of ways, because it's essentially just being proactive and taking steps to avoid or minimize risks, which I don't see why someone wouldn't want to do that. The example that I came up with was that I am often constructively paranoid when I'm driving, in that I just assume that everybody's going to do the stupidest possible thing. So I just stay vigilant all the time, so that when the time comes, if the time comes, which it usually does unfortunately, when someone does do something stupid, I'm ready and I can react quickly, or at least more quickly than I could if I had been, half asleep driving. As horrible as it is to assume the worst when it comes to driving, I genuinely do, because it just minimizes those risks, and driving is very dangerous on its own, so why would you not want to minimize potential risks, And then the most intriguing thing that I found about these two chapters, really was just the comparison of most common dangers, and just how out of whack in the Western world, our sense of what actually is dangerous is so out of line with what actually is dangerous. That really stood out to me, because I think the media really does twist around it tells us what we're supposed to be afraid of, instead of us just going out into the world and deciding what to be afraid of based off of our own experiences. We are told what to be afraid of, and so we enter the world with all of these fears when we don't really have any experience or, that would suggest that we should be afraid of it. So I thought that was very interesting. And then the whole part in chapter 7, I think it was, where his Diamond's boat capsizes, I thought that was intense. That was an intense bit of the book for me to read, because I can imagine, and I thought it was really interesting. He talks about the way his mind was working through all of this stuff as, like, in the couple of hours that he was struggling and trying to stay on top of this capsized boat. And he mentioned that his mind just keeps going back to, like, what about his luggage? Where's his stuff? He just keeps thinking about stuff like that. And all of the guys that he was with were all very calm and composed, and they had pretty much just accepted this is what's happening, and they were working through the steps that they would normally work through in that situation, whereas Diamond was just thinking about his passport. He was thinking about what's going to happen, to his family when they hear about him dying, and he's just thinking about all this other stuff. And so I think that really says a lot about how people deal with danger in the moment, in traditional societies compared to the Western world, because we're not, especially in that kind of a situation in the Western world, we're not at all prepared for something like that. And I thought it was really interesting that while it was happening, he was, in his mind, he's blaming all of these other people that he'd come in contact with. He's blaming the reckless drivers of the boat. He's blaming this, he's blaming that, all this stuff. And it wasn't until he spoke to that guy about his own constructive paranoia that he realizes, like, oh, wait a minute, this, it might have been my fault. And so he takes a step back and he looks at it in hindsight. He actually takes responsibility for what happened, and he kind of says to himself, like, if I had noticed, like that other gentleman did, that the young guys who were going to steer the boat were reckless and that they were loud and that they weren't going to listen to anybody, then Diamond probably would have waited for another boat, and it probably would have saved him a lot of trouble. And so I guess I just thought that was really interesting, because it often isn't until after the fact that we realize, where we could have done things differently. And I think constructive paranoia kind of helps eliminate that after the fact moment, because you just proactively take steps to avoid that regret, I guess, altogether. Yes, that's pretty much all I had to say this week. I'm gonna probably cut it off here, because each one of my videos has been like a movie, and I'm sure you guys are probably sick of that. So yeah, I guess I will see you guys next week, and thanks for watching.